My hands were still wet from the cold pump when the papers came back stamped and sharp and the patrol started stopping instead of passing. The orders wanted compliance, neat ledgers, doors opened on demand, and I watched neighbours pay for a wrong name in a drawer. I climbed into the silo with a rag and a tin cup, listening to dust settle, and would carry every breath like a report. When the road woke to brakes and smoke and I covered the slit from inside and wiped my tools clean, and knowing the system would come looking, it is 1944 in a flat farming district somewhere in occupied Western Europe. The front lines are shifting, but village life is still controlled by checkpoints, curfews and paperwork. A garrison controls the roads. Patrols pass on schedules that feel almost automatic. Somewhere nearby, a command post keeps careful lists of fuel, bread and men. Barns and sheds get searched when a rumour lands on the wrong desk or the wrong name gets mentioned. But by this stage of the war, the problem is familiar. Small local groups need a way to see over hedgerows and roofs. They need a place to watch from, and sometimes a place to shoot from, without it looking like a fighting position. They need height without climbing into a church tower. They need a clear view without building anything new that would draw attention the first time someone looks up. In the district there is a farmer who is known for fixing things, not a trained soldier, not a specialist with a uniform, just someone who knows how a place works. He knows which boards swell after rain and which nails squeal when they hit dry oak. He knows which doors stick when winter comes and which ladder rungs can carry weight without making a sound. His day starts before sunrise. He works the hand pump and feels the cold metal against his palm. The bucket taps the rim of the well because it always does, and he does not bother trying to stop it. Feed gets measured by habit, not by scale. Burlap sacks show old stitching where they have been repaired instead of thrown away. In a drawer there is a ledger with damp corners, kept safe because under-occupation paper can matter as much as food. There are stamps, ration coupons, and a folded notice about what happens if you are caught moving after dark. At the edge of his yard stands a silo. It is plain and familiar, tall and blunt, built for grain and fodder. The boards are weathered. Rain hits the roof with a dull, steady sound. To passing patrols it looks like any other farm silo. To anyone who works the land it reads as ordinary. It does not announce itself as military. The first problem shows up in the simplest way. From the ground, hedges cut the world into short slices. From the road, bends hide what matters until it is right on top of you. Messages move slowly on foot or by bicycle and always under watch. If a patrol turns early, nobody sees it in time. If a truck stops down a side lane, nobody knows until the damage is already done. People who try to watch from attic windows learn the limits fast. Attics are low and cramped. Sound gets trapped in them. You only see one direction. A tiny opening in a shutter becomes a bright rectangle at night. One careless lantern turns an observer into a clean silhouette. The farmer understands these failures because they come back to him as stories with consequences. A neighbour gets home late and the cart is searched, and hay pulled apart by gloved hands. A boy carrying eggs is held because he cannot name the man he says he is visiting. A messenger arrives out of breath with mud on his cuffs, saying a road is closed and nobody knew until it was too late. Every account ends in the same place, no clear line of sight, no warning. And in those months, the neat language of instruction does not match what people live through. Printed guidance talks about proper positions, fields of fire, standard observation posts. But real villages have church towers that are watched. Trees are cut down for fuel, buildings are already mapped, revisited, and checked again. Anything obvious gets treated like a threat. The farmer does not talk in formal terms, he thinks in angles. He understands how a man's eyes travel along a road. He understands how an officer looks for what does not belong. Soldiers see a barn as storage. They see sandbags as danger. The pressure builds. More movement on the roads, more searches. More questions asked too quickly. As if the answer does not matter. Only the fear behind it. In some places, retreating troops and nervous guards lose patience. A wrong answer is no longer met with a warning and a shove. It can turn into something harsher. People try the obvious solutions first and watch them fail. Someone uses a hayloft and gets spotted because the door is open at the wrong hour. Two observers hide near a tree line and a patrol pushes them out because that's exactly where a patrol expects someone to hide. Someone suggests the church tower and the idea dies immediately because the tower is already watched. Someone suggests the water tower, but it is too isolated and too visible to last. The strain shows up in small practical habits. People sleep in their clothes because it is easier than pretending nights are normal. And a bicycle chain gets oiled carefully because a squeal on a quiet road can ruin a life. Notes are written on thin paper and folded until the creases shine. A tin of matches is counted twice. A radio, if anyone has one, is wrapped in cloth when it is moved, because even the sound of metal against metal feels risky. The farmer's work keeps pulling him back to the silo. He patches a seam where rain has started to creep in. He checks a hinge. He climbs partway up to clear a clog. And he knows how the wind hits the roof and where it whistles. And he also knows the silo has something the others do not. It has a view. Above the hedges, above the orchard, above the low roofs. From that height, roads become lines instead of broken pieces. Fields look like a map. Even the curve where trucks naturally slow down becomes clear. He's not the first person to notice that height is useful in war. Armies have always used towers, lofts, ruins, any place that offers a wider view. And in wartime Europe, height is valuable, and it is also dangerous if it looks intentional. The difference here is not the idea of going high, it is the idea of being ignored. A silo is supposed to be there. It is part of the landscape. Still, he stays cautious at first. A man inside a silo is still a man in a tall structure. If it looks altered, it becomes a target. If it flashes light, it gives itself away. If it draws attention, it will not survive its first serious inspection. Yet another problem sits in the way authority works. Occupation officials inspect what they can count and list. They keep records of tools, livestock, grain deliveries. They require a farmer to open doors and show storage. They prefer predictable compliance. They punish improvisation. A silo is not searched often, but it can be searched. An officer can demand to see inside. A board patrol can climb if it feels like it. And a rifle report from that height would make people look up by instinct. And so the farmer tests the idea without committing to it. He climbs when the yard is quiet and stands still to listen. The inside sounds different than a barn. The boards carry vibration. A cough would travel. A dropped tool would ring out like a bell. He brings only small things at first, a rag, a tin cup, a length of cord. He leaves nothing that looks like military gear. He moves like someone doing maintenance. He tries to leave dust exactly as he found it. The first technical obstacle is simple to explain and hard to solve. If you want to fire from inside, you need an opening. The moment you create an opening, you create a pattern. And patterns get noticed. Cut a neat slit and it looks freshly cut. Drill a clean hole and it looks drilled. A new line in old wood catches light differently. Even from a distance, people notice straightness. He studies the silo's outer boards in daylight and again at dusk. He pays attention to old repairs, knots, splits, weatherstons. He notes edges where ivy has left marks, where birds have pecked. He chooses places that already look imperfect, not that because it makes the opening invisible, but because it lowers suspicion. He works slowly. He does not cut a crisp window like a carpenter making a frame. Instead, he loosens boards and shifts them just enough to create a thin gap that could be blamed on age. He uses wedges that can be removed. He avoids fresh splinters that would shine pale in certain light. Then he runs into another problem. A gap that disappears when you stand in the yard can show up as a dark line from the road. The eye catches contrast as quickly as it catches shape. A black slit in a grey wall still reads as something. So he experiments with shadow control. Cloth hung inside, not outside. A backing board set a short distance behind the gap. A dark surface that turns the opening into depth instead of a clean cut. Then he checks again, from the ground, from the lane. Song from the edge of the field, looking for anything that feels too deliberate. It is not only about what people see. Sound gives positions away. Inside a hollow structure, sound behaves badly. It bounces. It carries. A small metal clink can sound louder than it should. He lines contact points with rags. He sets a small pad where a boot might rest. He marks a path of movement so footsteps do not scrape. He learns where the boards flex and he avoids those spots. He also notices the air. That it is stale inside, dust rises if you shift your weight. Dust can drift towards small openings and catch light at the wrong moment. He decides anyone using the space will have to move less than instinct wants. Stillness becomes part of the plan, not suggestion. By late 1944, the pressure goes beyond observation. Some days patrols do not just pass through. They stop, they search, they take what they want, they make sure people see them doing it. A local group, not a regular army unit, that tries to gather information and avoid open fights they cannot win. They do not have fortified posts or supply lines for sandbags and timber and camouflage netting. They have what farms have: boards, rope, sacks, patience stretched thin. Losses are quiet, which makes them hard to count. Someone does not come back from a route. A family burns papers in a stove and the smoke smells wrong, like panic more than fuel. A cart is confiscated. And a barn is searched twice in a week, and the second search feels like punishment. Official instruction, when it filters down from distant authority, talks about restraint and control. But people living under occupation learn that restraint does not protect a village from arbitrary violence. The tension does not show up in speeches. It shows up in hands that tremble slightly when tying cord, in eyes that flick to the road too often, in a door that gets closed softly and then checked again, as if the sound might have carried. The silo stops being just an idea. It becomes an unofficial decision. Nobody announces it. Nobody writes it down neatly. It is agreed to in short, careful words, the kind people use when they know paper can be seized and mouths can slip. A shooter is chosen not for bravado but for steadiness. Maybe someone who hunted before the war, or someone trained earlier. In situations like this, records are often incomplete. Their names get left out later to protect families, or because paperwork never existed in the first place. What shows up consistently in later recollections is the emphasis on local knowledge. Knowing when a road is empty, knowing when an officer's car tends to pass, knowing which gate creaks and which can be opened without anyone hearing. Now the build has to deal with problems that are easy to ignore when you're only talking about theory. Muzzle flash can give away a position, and especially in low light, smoke can seep through an opening and hang in still air, and the first shot does not stay a single event. It tells everyone listening that a hidden place exists. The farmer adapts with what he has. He creates an internal baffle, a simple shield behind the gap, so any flash does not bloom cleanly at the opening. He thinks about sightlines from outside. If a bright point appears, where would someone need to stand to catch it? He tests this with a small lamp and covers it quickly. He does not do it often. Practicing carries its own risk. Sound control matters just as much. A shot from height echoes in strange ways. It can bounce off nearby roofs. It can be hard to pinpoint, but it can also make people look toward the tallest structure nearby. He reduces the internal echo with hanging sacks and folded cloth. He chooses materials that look like normal farm items because everything has to be explainable. And he avoids anything that would look like deliberate soundproofing if someone climbs inside and starts asking questions. The firing gap has to work without inviting inspection. He keeps it narrow. He aligns it with a stretch of road where vehicles naturally slow down at a bend or a shallow rise, a place where brakes complain in wet weather. He plans for the movement of the weapon without naming its model or caliber, because in these local actions the weapons can vary widely. Some are captured. Some come from earlier issue, some are hunting arms pressed into wartime use. Without records, pretending to know exact details would be dishonest. So the plan sticks to what is true no matter what the weapon is. It needs a stable rest. The shooter needs room to shift slightly without scraping wood. A shot will produce smoke and noise, and if a casing is ejected, it cannot clatter against boards and announce itself. He adds a simple padded rest. And he positions it so it does not press against the outer wall. He makes sure any small metal parts are wrapped or dulled. No shine near the gap. No fresh cut surfaces that catch the eye. Escape is planned before any shot is taken because a position without an exit is a trap. The silo's height is an advantage until it becomes a cage. A ladder can be pulled away. A door can be guarded. A structure can be set alight. He identifies more than one way down. A secondary ladder inside, made from spare wood and fastened quietly. A route through an adjacent shed roof if the buildings touch. A hidden gap in a fence. A place where evidence could be discarded quickly if it has to be. Nothing is written. If anything survives, it is in remembered instructions. Move at a certain hour. Do not carry certain items. Do not linger in the yard if a patrol appears. The turning point does not arrive as a big announcement. It arrives as a shift in daily patterns. More vehicles. A more hurried movement. More signs the garrison is nervous. In times like that, small attacks and sudden counterattacks can flare without warning. A roadblock appears in the morning and is gone by afternoon. A convoy moves faster than usual. A messenger reports that certain fields are being avoided, and nobody asks why out loud. The silo is used as an observation post first. The observer climbs in grey light and waits. No lantern, no cigarette. Only what can be hidden in a pocket. That's maybe a small notebook, or just memory. If there is a watch, it is checked by touch, not by lifting a wrist into view. From that height, the district looks different. Tractors and carts become small shapes. Footpaths connect in ways you cannot see from the ground. Patrol's rhythm becomes something you can read. Even the time between pairs of boots starts to feel like a pattern. The observer notes routines. A vehicle that pauses at a certain crossroads. A sentry who smokes at the same spot. And a gate opened and closed at the same hour. None of this feels so heroic. It is simply the kind of detail that decides who gets caught and who slips away. Even with the new vantage point, failure remains possible. Fog can erase the view. Rain can turn the gap into a leaking seam. A stray animal can knock something loose. A patrol can change its route without warning. One day a patrol stops near the farm longer than usual. The farmer stays visible and keeps working. He handles a sack. And he checks a latch. His posture stays loose, like a man with chores, not a man guarding a secret. The patrol glances up once. It is casual, not the stare of someone hunting. The silo is still what it is meant to appear as, a piece of farm equipment, not a fortified post. This is where the non-military look stops being luck and becomes part of the method. Men trained to look for wire, sandbags and firing ports can overlook weathered boards. And men trained to suspect towers can ignore a farm cylinder. The disguise is not paint, it is familiarity. The pressure rises again when the local group is pushed to do more than watch. A road is being used by vehicles that matter. But not every truck is worth risking a farm. Not every uniformed man is worth the consequences of a shot. The decision is weighed in quiet, practical terms. If a shot is taken, what happens to the families nearby? How fast can people scatter? But whether reprisals will follow. These questions belong to the historical reality of occupied areas. Later reports often speak carefully, and official documents sometimes avoid the moral weight altogether. What remains is a pattern of restraint shaped by fear and experience. The decision becomes narrow. Act only if a specific condition appears. A target that threatens immediate harm. A vehicle carrying someone whose presence brings danger to the village. A moment when withdrawal is possible. The shooter climbs on a day when the air is thin and cold. The farmer helps in the way he always does, by looking ordinary. He moves as if repairing a hinge. He carries cloth as if it is meant for cleaning tools. He does not look up. Inside, the shooter settles into stillness. Breath is kept controlled to avoid stirring dust. The weapon is positioned without scraping wood. A rag goes under a metal point so nothing clinks. The gap is used without widening it. The shooter waits. The tension is not spoken. It sits inside the minutes. Distant engines, a dog bark, a bird landing on the roof and shifting its weight. The sound carries inside the hollow space. The shooter stays still. The vehicle appears as the curve delivers it slowly, exactly as the observer has watched it do for days. The timing is not guessed. It is learned. The shot, when it comes, is controlled and brief. No volley, no attempt to fight a battle from a farm structure. And just one action taken with a clear purpose. The sound snaps and then the echo follows. There is a short pause and then the road reacts. Brakes, shouts carried by wind. The vehicle does not simply roll on as if nothing happened. The road becomes alert. Inside the silo, the shooter follows the steps planned ahead of time. No second shot unless it is absolutely needed. No careless movement that makes a scrape. The weapon is withdrawn from the gap. The gap is covered from inside with dark cloth so it does not read as a fresh opening. Anything that could be left behind is gathered quickly. If there is brass, it is caught in cloth or pocketed. Nothing is allowed to fall and ring. Escape begins before the outside world has fully understood where the shot came from. The shooter moves down the quiet path of boards the farmer marked. The small choices made earlier matter now. One loud step could draw eyes to the silo. Then one knocked tool could betray a descent. Outside, the farmer shifts into another kind of routine. He makes himself visible. He walks into the yard with a bucket. He calls to an animal. To anyone watching, he's just a man on a farm doing what farms require. The shooter leaves by the route chosen earlier. Not along the road, not through the obvious gate. A back path, a break in a hedge, ground already softened by boots and weather. The consequences come fast, but they come as procedure, and not theatre. Roadblocks, searches, questioning. The bureaucracy does not pause because it is frightened. It becomes stricter, more methodical. A notice appears in formal language threatening punishment for attacks. It is pasted where people must see it. Everyone knows it is not meant to persuade, it is meant to warn. Investigators arrive with lists. They ask who was home, they ask who owns which bicycle, they ask why certain tools were bought, they check signatures on delivery sheets. They compare handwriting and treat small details as evidence. This is where the farmer's approach shows what it was really built for. He never turned the silo into a bunker. He never piled earth around it. He never cut crisp holes that would look like a fighting position. He never left a military scent. The silo stayed a silo. Suspicion still spreads, because after a shot from height, every tall structure looks different. The garrison looks up more often. Men point and talk. Though they climb places they had ignored before, a search of the farm remains possible, and if it happens, it is invasive in small, exhausting ways. Hands in drawers, sacks cut open, a ledger held too long, questions about why rags are stored where they are, demands to open doors. The farmer answers with short, practical replies. He shows ordinary repairs, he points to rot and weather, he complains mildly about shortages and broken hinges because complaining sounds normal. And he offers no dramatic defiance because the drama attracts attention. If the silo is inspected, it offers little. The gaps are not neat. The cloth inside looks like farm cloth. Anything that looks questionable can be removed quickly. The interior path can be explained as maintenance. The choices were made with this exact moment in mind. By now the risk is personal in a plain, measurable way. The farm is not just a place, it is shelter and food and survival. If it is seized or burned, then it is not symbolism, it is hunger. Tension grows again as outside forces shift. If regular military units approach, they may demand standard procedures. They may prefer clearly marked positions and direct control. Local improvisation can look like disorder to someone reading a map and thinking in official terms. In some areas, new authorities have little patience for irregular methods. They want accountability. They want names on paper. Locals resist giving names because paper can be captured. And captured paper turns into arrests. Pushback can come from more than one direction. Occupiers enforcing security. Local administrators told to report suspicious behaviour. Emerging authorities insisting on discipline and centralised control. The silo tactic fits awkwardly into all of it. It works because it is informal. It survives because it looks unplanned. The moment it becomes official, it becomes visible. If a memo is ever written later, it is likely vague. It might mention local observation from agricultural structures. It would avoid details that could implicate civilians. Language in those documents is often careful because responsibility can be dangerous long after the shooting stops. The stakes peak quietly when an inspection becomes more serious. A truck arrives carrying men who do not look bored. They move with purpose. They split into pairs and check boundaries and outbuildings. The farmer does not run. Running would be an admission. Yes, he keeps his hands busy. His face stays neutral. He watches their eyes, not their weapons, because eyes show intent faster. One of them studies the silo longer than the rest and shifts positions just to and slightly. Changing angle, searching for lines that do not belong, the farmer notices and does not interfere. Interference would only make the moment sharper. The inspector moves on. Maybe he noticed something and decided it was not worth it. Maybe he found nothing that satisfied his suspicion. And either way, the outcome is the same. The silo stays standing. After a day like that, the farmer cleans his tools carefully. Not because they are especially dirty, but because cleaning gives his hands something steady to do. A clean tool suggests an orderly life. In wartime, order can be a kind of cover. The silo is not used every day. One shot can be enough to end a method, or at least to pause it. Sometimes the value is in the threat, not in repeating it. And if the enemy starts watching tool structures closely, the advantage shifts. The local group returns to observation and avoidance when that is the only thing that keeps people alive. The war keeps grinding forward through paperwork and mud. Shortages worsen, then change as lines move. Patrol routines alter as troops rotate or withdraw. The farmer keeps the farm running through uncertainty. He repairs boards that have nothing to do with the war. And he mends a gate because animals still need containing. He stores grain because hunger does not wait for politics. When control of the district changes, the new authorities bring their own procedures. They ask for accounts, they ask for statements. They want to know what happened and who did it. Some people speak, many do not. Silence is not always fear. Sometimes it is habit, learned under danger and kept because it still feels safer than explanation. If any recognition appears later, and it often comes indirectly, a report might mention that local observers provided early warning. A statement might note improvised high ground positions. Civilian involvement is softened in wording. Records suggest many such actions were left undocumented on purpose, not because they were unimportant, but because documentation could endanger survivors. The farmer's role ends up sitting between categories. Not purely military, not purely civilian, and just someone using ordinary knowledge to solve a tactical problem. A structure meant for fodder becomes a quiet way to control a road. A familiar shape becomes concealment. Angles and routines become protection. The lessons, when they are remembered, stay practical. A firing gap is not just a hole, it is a signature. Sound is not just noise, it is location. Muzzle flash is not just light, it is an accusation. Escape is not an afterthought. It is the first plan. He leaves no blueprint behind. He leaves a silo that still looks like a silo. He leaves neighbours who remember that he understood the land in a way maps did not. He leaves one small example of wartime improvisation shaped by restraint and by the need to survive. In the years after, farms are rebuilt and boards are replaced. Wood with subtle gaps gets removed, burned or reused. The silo's wartime use becomes a story told carefully if it is told at all. Sometimes it gets reduced to a single sentence in a local recollection. Sometimes it disappears from official histories. There were larger operations to record, and archives prefer units and dates and paperwork that fits filing systems. But the logic of that silo belongs to the broader reality of the conflict. In occupied landscapes, the difference between being seen and being overlooked could come down to a thin line in wood. A routine glance could be fooled by familiarity. A non-military structure could hold a military advantage without changing its outward identity. The farmer returns to routine because routine is how life keeps going. He handles sacks that leave dust on his wrists. He wipes a tin cup and sets it upside down to dry. He folds papers and puts them back in a drawer, with the same care he used under occupation. He does not frame it as heroism. He treats it as a problem solved with what was available. Over time, the story settles into a quiet kind of legacy. Not a doctrine, not a monument, just a reminder that war is not only trenches and uniforms, it is also ordinary places turned dangerous by people who understand angles, routines, and timing. If you want more of these overlooked stories of wartime improvisation and the people behind them, consider subscribing.